So we'll start today by remembering the context we began to describe last time. This is the diffuse religious context of China, a syncretic mix of various traditions, especially the three teachings, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, along with Chinese popular religion. The three teachings are Buddhism, which we've looked at in a previous unit, along with the Confucianism and Taoism, both of which are traditions native to China, and both of which we'll turn to in this unit. But first, in this lecture, we'll fill in a little more of the picture of the popular folk religion that preceded both of those traditions in China. So the next couple of slides we've also seen, but I put them here as a reminder and to keep our conversation contextualized. These are, again, the prevalent shared beliefs of Chinese diffuse religion. And so as to this organic business, what I mean by organic here is not architectural. So organic development is like the development of a person from a baby to an old man or woman. One grows, one changes, but one does so as a whole. Opposed to this would be an architectural vision where you might build a one-room shack. You say, oh, this is a great spot. Look, there's a river. That's nice. I'm going to build a shack here, right? And you build this one-room shack, and you think, oh, that's cool. I can live here for a while. But then you decide you need more space for whatever reason, and you sort of add a second room. Okay, that's cool. And then maybe a porch. Porches are nice. Add a bathroom because the outhouse is getting old. Whatever. The whole changes, but the initial structure doesn't. It remains the same. It's added onto architecturally. When the whole changes or develops or grows, you have these extra pieces added. This is not the vision that we're talking about here. Not the vision that we see in the world of Chinese religion. Here, when the whole changes or develops or grows, it's seen to do so altogether. Changes to society are at the same time changes to the larger cosmos. And on the flip side, disruptions to the heavenly sphere, they don't happen in isolation somehow of the earthly sphere or any earthly disruptions. They're of a piece. So we'll see this more and specifically as we move through this unit. Then we looked at the three main aspects of the shared ritualism that unifies these traditions more than does anything else. Now, ritual divination and sacrifice began, as far as we can tell, in the Shang dynasty. And dates are shaky here, and they differ. So you'll see different dates in different books, but source to source. But the Shang is the earliest archaeologically recorded dynasty in Chinese history. It's not the earliest in terms of mythos. There were a few before, but this is the earliest that we see in the historical or archaeological record. And so it makes sense that what we get in terms of dates is a range. It's historical guessing. Now, in the Shang dynasty, patterns were developed that would recur throughout history and into the present era. This religion of the Shang aristocracy centered around the king and his relationship with the supernatural realm, especially with the Shangdi, or High Lord, or just the Di Lord. But it wasn't a one-on-one oracle-style relationship between the earthly and the heavenly king, like I have this great power on earth, and so I talk to the guy who has great power in heaven, kind of like you might see the sort of, just a direct oracle-style relationship. It was more as if the aristocracy of the earth, the court of the king, was mirrored completely in the heavens in its totality. So the Shang king or emperor maintained a relationship on behalf of his people with the heavenly king and with the ancestors who served under this heavenly king. And this ritualized and ritually maintained relationship wasn't simply a charade. It wasn't a grand pageant. Earthly success, stability, and flourishing all depended on maintaining a balance between these realms. The highest goals of human life required were dependent upon a good relationship with the parallel supernatural realm. And the maintenance of this relationship depended on the kings. They were the ones who had the direct access. So keeping this relationship up required sacrifice, and that sacrifice was interpreted through divination, or the reading of the signs provided in the natural sphere. That's what divination is. By reading these signs, the king, and those whose job it was to assist him, would hope to receive knowledge of future natural events like natural disasters or ideal crop cycles, like is the freeze still going to come? Should I plant my tomatoes? And imminent military incursions, like who's coming over that hillside, and they'd also hope to receive knowledge of the disposition of the heavenly court, like are they pleased, are they discontented, whatever. So the goal, remember, is earthly success, stability, and flourishing of the kingdom. And divination was practiced at about this time in communities around the globe. It was common practice, and the methods used for divination differed from place to place. It turns out that there's more than one way to do this well. The classical Romans and Greeks before them used to read the quivering entrails of the animals that had been sacrificed to the gods, and the Romans also watched the birds, which is relevant to us in our language. The one whose job it was to divine or to read the will of the gods would hold his arms out and sort of mark off a sphere in the sky. I wouldn't want to be under a tree. I'd want to be in the open, but I want to mark off a sort of a canvas in the sky, and then I'd watch that part of the sky, and watch the flight of the birds through it, through the part that was marked off. Now, a fun fact: auspex is the Latin name for bird, and this is where we get our word auspicious, or of good omen, from this practice of reading the birds in the sky. Fun. Back to China. One common divination method in China was the use of oracle bones. Over 100,000 of these bones have been found. What they do is use a very hot stick to puncture or crack a relatively flat bone, usually a tortoise shell or the thigh bone of a cow, something big and flattish. And then they'd read the cracks. And some scholars believe that these cracks were the very earliest form of Chinese pictographic script, and so were the beginning of Chinese written language. It was through these oracle bones that sacrifices were made to the sacrifices that were made to the heavenly court were interpreted, through which important decisions of state were made. And so early on, from the earliest records we have, politics and religion are inextricably bound in the Chinese context. That you just can't separate them. It wasn't about the soul of the king individually. It wasn't about that kind of individual salvation. It was about maintaining harmonious relations, about maintaining a harmony between the sacred realm and the mundane realm. This was the purpose of Shang ritual. And for something like 500 years, that system more or less worked. The kingdom ran pretty smoothly. Harmony between the earthly Shang aristocracy and the heavenly court of the Shangdi was maintained, until it wasn't. And in the middle of the 11th century BCE, and again, dates are still a little shaky here, the early Zhou overthrew the Shang. And Zhou is spelled generally like that. They overthrew the Shang in about the middle of the 11th century BCE. It's, no big deal, right? You're like, these things change, things happen. This sort of governmental change happens all the time in history, and we don't think much of it, right? But this transition, this dynastic change, was fraught with religious import, with sacred implication, because it was only through the Shang kings or emperors that balance with heaven was maintained. Heaven and earth were in harmony because of the ritualized acts of the Shang aristocracy, and everybody knew that. They had for 500 years, there had been much high ritual, much pomp and circumstance to make this relationship clear. And the people they knew they depended on the emperor's sacrifice for the health and safety of their own families. Now, if you knew that was the case, if you knew that the guy in charge was your direct link to the heavens and the one sort of balancing the scales and keeping this tree from collapsing on me, or some kind of great flood from coming over, or the Mongols from charging this hillside, if you knew that it was the sort of government's role to do that, that was the mechanism through which harmony was maintained, how comfortable would you feel about a new guy taking the reins? It's something you have to ask yourself, and you probably wouldn't feel that comfortable. And as you might imagine, the people, they weren't altogether comfortable with this. And the Zhou kings were responsive to this discomfort, understood that they needed to make clear to the people why this dynastic change was okay, to assure them that this governmental transition, which was also a religious transition, wouldn't catapult the entire cosmic order into complete disarray. And so one way that they did that was they called themselves the Sons of Heaven. They were the first of the dynastic kings or emperors to do so. Dynastic change was explained by the Zhou kings and continued through the 20th century, through the early 20th century, to be explained in terms of this mandate of heaven. This was a rulership. The idea here was that rulership was ostensibly based on virtue. It was an explanation for the legitimacy of dynastic change. So when a new dynasty takes over, it's because the old dynasty had been corrupt. Now, of course, we can see the potential dangers of this system, how easily it might be abused. Power itself is used as evidence for a dynasty's virtue, like I'm powerful, therefore I'm good. And the lack or loss of power is correspondingly used as evidence for moral corruption, like I'm marginalized and I'm oppressed and I'm beaten down, so therefore I'm not good, right? We can see the danger of this, but at any rate, this is how dynastic change is understood for over 2,000 years in China. And the crash course link that I've posted runs through this history really quickly, but pretty well, so take a look at that. Now, the next few pictures are from the contemporary world and show how that shared ritualism that was initiated by the Shang dynasty has carried through not only in China but also in those nations that have been historically part of the Chinese sphere of influence. This picture comes from a Vietnamese home and shows a home altar with images of family members who have died or ancestors. Offerings you can see are regularly given, usually something that one can actually give regularly, fruit. Incense is regularly burned. This is the veneration of ancestors that we've spoken on in a really sort of immediate street level way. And here we see in China a sacrifice that is itself part of this veneration. This photo was taken on Tomb Sweeping Day, a Chinese national holiday in early spring, when ancestors are remembered and honored on a national level. The woman pictured here is throwing joss paper or ghost money into the fire so that it might be carried through the flames and smoke to her dead relatives, to her ancestors, and might benefit them in the heavenly realm, which would then in turn dispose them to help her out in the earthly realm. This is a symbolic sacrifice, and it's a common one. You can see the piles of joss paper to the right of the fire. People will come all day, not only on this day, but especially on this day, to make offerings in a temple setting to their ancestors, who are understood, again, to still be present, peopling the cosmos and able to influence our experience in this life. And finally, this is an image from the same holiday, though in a different part of China. You can see from this that Tomb Sweeping Day really does involve visiting tombstones or grave sites, cleaning the stones, and really recognizing the importance of one's ancestral line, living into an authentic respect of the past. So next time we'll turn to Confucius, for whom this ancestral respect was absolutely central.